Well, hey there. We're going to talk about Reverb today. It's your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol. That's wavetables.lol, home of KRC Math Waves, the world's largest collection of wavetables, single-cycle waveforms, and even some samples for all sorts of modern synthesizers, including our friend Multipoly Native, which we're listening to. And also, I made my first plugin. And we're hearing it right now. The reverb that's in the background on this sound. Let me just turn this off for a second. Here's my sound. This is the frac bell patch from my Multipoly KRC Collection 1 patches for Korg Multipoly. And I've turned off the native reverb in Multipoly and am using Liminal Space, which I call a haunted digital reverb. We're going to talk about the genesis of this and also do kind of a video user manual for it. And I'll talk about the world of plugin development, which is relatively new to me. Just all sorts of things about reverb and stealing ideas from other interesting things. So the genesis of Liminal Space is that a couple of weeks ago, let's see, that's not what I wanted to hear. There may still be one or two bugs in this. It's my first plugin, guys. Friend. It's my first plugin, friend. Guys. When I start saying guys, I don't say guys around here. Anyway, a couple weeks ago, Chris from Airwindows introduced a new plugin in his Airwindows collection. I've also got that loaded into my project. And it's called kCosmos. You're hearing it now. And he'd done a video where he showed how he was creating algorithms for this reverb. And here's the interface for it. It has a very simple interface, like all of the Airwindows consolidated plugins do. The way Chris ships his plugins natively is headless, like without any interface at all. So they just show up like you're seeing down here in Bewig. I believe this is the CLAP version of this plugin. But kCosmos is this like kind of space ambient reverb that that I loved the sound of. And he had sort of challenged his viewers to if you could build the plugin yourself, you could create your own algorithms for it. And the algorithms for this reverb are really just the settings for the 25 delay lines. It's a 5x5 householder matrix. It does all sorts of cool things, but it's got just a very small number of controls, as you can see. There's regeneration, and it will go infinite, which is pretty cool. And then it's got his Dres parameter. Dres is like a Bezier curve or spline-based sort of bit crushing effect. And if you modulate it, it makes this cool pitch bending effect. And one thing that I had showed, let's shut that down a little bit, shall we? One thing I'd showed in a previous video was his original reverb that did this, which I think is called Crunch Coat. It's his cursed digital reverb. Debuted the Dres control. And one thing that I found really interesting is that you could modulate it. Like if you're in, is this modulators? That's not, is that modulators? If you modulate it, I don't actually want to show this, really. God, there it is. There's modulators. If you modulate Dres, you can get all sorts of interesting effects. And let's grab a wavetable LFO. I'll just show this real quick. And I guess then we'll connect this to Dres. Yeah, right? Now that's really extreme. That's like a very extreme modulation. But you can make it sound like really cool. And then if you were to modulate the wavetable LFO or select a different wavetable, like, I don't know, maybe one of the KRC math waves wavetables, right, which are available for Bitwig format, you could get some like really complex sort of shapes going on that sort of sound, again, I'm really like, where's the scale on this? There we go. It's still too high. You can get some effects that kind of sound like tape or VHS. And then, of course, you could modulate the index or the rate or the depth on the wavetable LFO and get like wildly varying effects. And I thought this was very cool to do. And so since he had challenged people to create their own algorithms, let's just delete that for a second, for kCosmos, I was like, oh, I want to try that. And Chris had his own like pretty crazy contraption that he had built in Godot, which is sort of like a Python environment. It's this very Python-like language, but it's for creating games. And so his thing that was generating reverb algorithms based on like a genetic algorithm is sort of like breeding the the delay settings for great sounding reverbs. I found that really interesting. I took his original code and ported it to Python because it's so close to Python. And honestly, I wasn't really thrilled with. Let's get cassette. So here's that same kind of effect that I was just doing in kCosmos, but you can hear that there's a built-in LFO here that can modulate the DRes parameter. And so we can get these really cool. Maybe we should bring up our mix a little bit. Let's make it fully wet so you can just hear the modulated reverb. Pretty crazy, right? So I ported his code to Python and then enhanced it so that I could run it. Listen to that. I ported it to Python so that I could run it in Google Colab on a giant A100 GPU and evaluate like millions of algorithms in a very short amount of time. And so I created my own huge library, like I do, of the delay settings for kCosmos. And because that plugin is fully open source, the MIT license, you can take it and make it your own. And I was like, I'm programmery. I mean, I don't write a lot of C++, but I'm like, I can figure out how this works. And so I was able to make it build, and I was able to add my own algorithms to it. And I was like, well, this is kind of like kludgy to only be able to, substitute the delay line settings like one at a time. And so I added things to it, like it can just load reverb settings that I call algorithms, like from disk, and completely change its settings. So like, we can just change the algorithm, and different algorithms will do different things. Like here are some ones that are based on the kCosmos settings, but sound a little different. We're also hearing a little bit of chorus stuff, and we'll talk about that in the kind of user manual part of this. But anyway, so I starting with his VST 2.4 version plugin, I built out a huge number of new features that let you tweak the internal parameters of kCosmos like really, really deeply, probably in sort of an insane way. But if you've ever wanted a programmable reverb, well, Liminal Space, as I call my version, the haunted digital reverb, has about 50 different parameters that you can change and does some tricks that I think are pretty cool. And we'll talk about them more in a minute. So I'm going to take a quick break, as I usually do, to collect my thoughts. And then we're going to talk about Liminal Space, haunted digital reverb. Oh, I should mention, um, uh, KRC Mathwaves is 50% off right now in our summer sale. Use code summer25. There'll be a link in the description. Use code summer25 to get KRC Mathwaves, which is 160,000 wavetables for all sorts of modern synthesizers. So the Serum, Vital, the Korg wavetable synthesizers, phase plant version. You can use them in your Eurorack modules that do wavetables. Anyway, it's just $14.50 right now if you use the discount code. Or, you can pay me 100%. Like, that's actually okay to do. You're like, Keith, you're so cool. You're so generous. You're so fun to watch. I want to give you $29. Well, you can do that. Or you can use the discount code. Links in the description. I'm taking a short break and then I'll be right back. It's very pretty sounding. Let's put a different synth in here. So that was multi-poly. Let's put our friend SoundPaint in here, shall we? Let's use that as a source. And SoundPaint, which is free, by the way. There'll be links in the description. There's always links in the description. Let's go get there. They have kind of a scoring piano that's entirely free. So you can go and download SoundPaint, and then from the application or the plugin itself, you can just download this. I think you click here. Let's see, Vintage Grand Steinway. What's the haunted one? Oh, that's cool. Let's turn off its built-in reverb, and let's just play that through Liminal Space. So what does this sound like with the reverb off? It's got that kind of detuned delay line going on in it, and when you feed it in the Liminal Space, it gives you that very nostalgic kind of feel. And you don't have to play many notes. I could listen to that all day. Anyway, it's a very cool reverb. But having experimented with creating my own reverb algorithms for kCosmos, which is interesting to do, I was like, gosh, I really want to extend this plugin to do a bunch of other things. So you saw in kCosmos, now I have to go load Airwindows again. Airwindows Consolidated is also free, by the way. Although I subscribe to Chris Johnson's Patreon. And support him at the $6.66 per month level, because I'm just like that. Here's kCosmos. I was like, what I really want to do is I want to add a whole bunch of features to this. And one thing that kCosmos does not do, it's completely this householder matrix based reverb. So 25 delay lines, and there's no modulation on the delay lines. There's no explicit diffuser in there. A lot of reverbs will have a set of all pass filters or things like that to kind of scramble the phases of the different delay lines. And so I wanted to do that. And then also, because it's just so, the DRes parameter is cool to modulate, so I wanted to build that in. And then I wanted to build modulation into the delay lines themselves in an effort to create something that sounds a little bit like diffusion. And then also to do effecty stuff, not like a shimmer reverb. The shimmer reverb takes pitch shifting kind of to the extremes, and the input signal will be like tuned up like an octave or even 2 octaves, and then fed into the reverb. I had this sort of different idea. I wanted to do pitch shifting on um, the individual delay lines themselves. That's a little more subtle to get these kind of chorusy effects. And I guess we could hear one right now, probably. Let's see. Let's do Like Our Owl. You hear that in the background? I really like that. It reminds me of the Lexicon 224, which was kind of an audio reference for me, at least my mental model of the 224, as I was trying out ideas that have become liminal space. So you can see that this goes very far afield from the original kCosmos. Which is a beautiful sounding reverb in itself. So I don't know what else do I want to say about this? It's really cool. It's after I had kind of gotten the whole thing running in VST 2.4 and grafted a bunch of features onto it. I ported it to CLAP because that's the clever audio plugin format, not like chlamydia. I remember that not so many videos back, I was like, I don't even know what is this CLAP thing? CLAP is a new, completely open source plugin format that more and more DAWs are supporting. And one of the reasons for CLAP's existence is that Steinberg's licensing for VST 2.4 ended some time ago. I guess it's years ago now, and they tried to get everyone to move to VST3, which you'll find most plugins will support VST3 these days. But if you didn't have an existing license for VST 2.4, like our buddy Chris from Airwindows has, technically you can't distribute VST 2.4 plugins. So I was like, well, I want to distribute this one, and it will be available at www.wavetables.lol. Look for Liminal Space, Haunted Digital Reverb. It's available in CLAP format now for Windows. So if you're like a Bitwig or Reaper user, I'm not sure what other DAWs support CLAP today. I could have done that research before making this video, but you'll know. You know the platforms you use. I will eventually have a Macintosh build of this, but I don't have a Mac here, so I'm going to have a friend help me out with that. It's a pretty cool preset. So anyway, I learned about CLAP development, and CLAP and VST3 are more complex than VST 2.4, which is what Chris still codes to. But like I say, like not all of us can distribute things in VST 2.4. The other thing I was kind of inspired by when I was building this reverb is Arturia is pure lo-fi, which annoyingly, in my review of pure lo-fi, I'm on Windows, and so in the Windows build, there are some bugs, like the quote-unquote real instruments, the sampled instruments, don't respect envelope settings, so they always cut off. You can't they'll sustain on a key press, but when you release, and we're not playing pure lo-fi right now, we're playing SoundPaint. When you release them, like they immediately cut off, like all the time. And I reported that bug to Arturia. It's also in my video. You can go see it. And they still haven't fixed that bug for Windows. There hasn't been another build of pure lo-fi. So it's like, okay, so they're haters, I guess, against Windows. So I'm going to be a hater against Mac for a while. Also, whatever that nonsense that Tim Cook did this week. Anyway, yeah, just go lick some boots, bro. So, my Mac using friends, I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait a minute until there's a Mac build of this. But if you're Windows and you've got a clap host like the excellent Bitwig, this will run for you. And yeah, I'm going to price this cheap and cheerful, like all of my other little projects that aren't KRC MathWaves itself. But my multi-poly. That preset's called VHS. You can hear that D-res modulation. Anyway, like my multi-poly patch set and like KRC Orchestral Impressions, which by the way is in version 2 now. There's more than 70,000 wavetables based on actual real instrument recordings that have been turned into wavetables. And V2, which I did not make its own video about, V2 has even more instruments because I worked on my algorithm for converting sounds to, let's get mod wave, not multipoly. My algorithm for converting sounds to wavetables, I really overhauled it, and I had previously thrown out, I don't want that update now. I had previously essentially disregarded nope, I want this one. I want this one. Thank you, ModWave. This is a sound from, or a wavetable from the version 2 Orchestral Impressions collection. This is a recorder. Listen to that delicious D-res effect. So anyway, that's just $5, and you can go get that 70,000 wavetables for ModWave, Multipoly, Serum, Vital, whatever you want to do there. I was going to do a whole video about converting audio to wavetables, because Serum, actually, the built-in conversion there now is actually quite good in Serum 2. It's a different approach from what I did offline to create these organic wavetables. But it's worth talking about. Maybe I'll do a video about that in the future. But back to Reverb. So let's just take a little listen to Liminal Space. Now, Liminal Space, like Chris's plugins, is headless. It doesn't have a GUI. I will eventually build a GUI for this, but that is like, it's not a very easy thing to do. In fact, the more that I mess around with plugin programming, I'm like, how does anyone ever get anything done? I mean, there's so many platforms to support and so many formats, and I know a lot of people default to using these frameworks like Juice, which is cool. Juice is cool, and then there's one called iPlug2, but they're super complicated. They take away they get out of your way, like all of the nonsense about the different formats and, how to do cross-platform graphics and things like that. But there's a lot to learn there. And, I'm more, like, I can do DSP stuff, but, graphic design and GUI design is not my passion. So right now, this is how you interact with liminal space. It'll just show up in your host, and it exposes all the parameters that you can deal with. Now, the init patch, like the sound that you would have if you just drop it into a project, is very much like the original kCosmos. It has my own algorithm in it, but it's just like it's a very smooth, digital reverb sounding thing that has what I think is a very nice algorithm. This one, it sustains a little longer than Chris's kCosmos, and you can change the algorithm here with the algo knob, and there's many banks of different algorithms, and you may not hear a huge amount of difference between like the raw algorithms. Whoa. They're just all going to have like slightly different characters to them. Like this one's sort of natively darker than what we were just hearing. Has a really nice tail to it. And you get, so at the top of the interface here, there are the parameters that you would be familiar with from kCosmos if you've used that. But I've cribbed a couple of ideas from excellent reverb plugins like Valhalla Supermassive, which is technically a delay plugin, but has some algorithms that turn the delays into reverbs. But the basic parameters here are like you've got preset control, you've got banks of algorithms, you have the algorithms within those banks. This one has a little more of a delay character. And then shift and scale, we'll talk about those a little bit. You've got the regen parameter from kCosmos. If you crank regen all the way up to 100%, in most cases, you will get an infinitely sustaining reverb. So this is the idea behind kCosmos, and one of the ideas behind Liminal Space is that you could use it as like an ambient bed kind of generator. Reverbs can be like granular synthesizers in a way. And then it also implements the derez thing, that it's completely the same code. Although I do think I found an optimization or two in here. You've got derez, you've got a filter control. So the filter will let you add more high frequency. Like you can make a really dark reverb. Let's just dump that for a second. If you move regen all the way down to 0, the delay buffers will clear, and you'll kind of have a clean slate to work with. So you can hear if the filter is really low, it gets darker. It's a low pass filter that's in front of the reverb. Let's move derez back up to 100% so that we're not bit crushing. So you can get a really dark sound, or if the filter is fully up, it's brighter and will sustain, forever and ever with the highs in it. But if you were to move the filter down when you've got regen way up, it'll very quickly damp like that. And I'm tired of this recorder sound. Really? It's like, what am I, Zamfir, master of the pan flute? No. Let's see. What is this? I don't know what the sound is. Oh, it's more of a synthy thing. Let's hear it without the reverb. So it's just a sustainy synth sound with some delay on it, and then through the reverb. So anyway, those are the features that are from kCosmos. There's also an early reflections control. So 5 of the reverb taps are used, or the delay taps are used for an early reflections part of the reverb, and then another 20 of the delayed taps in the householder matrix are used for the sustained part. So you can turn this all the way off if you want. And now you've only got that really long sustained tail. Let's turn regen back up. But you can put in more early reflections by moving this knob up. And then one thing I added, since Chris's approach was sort of arbitrary. There's some specific delay taps that are used for early reflections, but they don't necessarily correspond to the shortest taps. And so I added an early reflection mode where you can do the default kCosmos behavior, or you can select only the shortest delays for the early reflections. And that'll have its own character. Or we can take the median, we can take the 5 medium-sized delays and make those the early reflections, or we can use for the early reflections the longest delays. That's kind of cool. There's pre-delay, that's actually from kCosmos. So, if we had like a short, you can do short reverbs with this. Where's a short one? Here. There's a very short reverb here using a different algorithm, and so you can hear the pre-delay. Dun, 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 dun. My wonderful singing voice there. And you can see that you can hear the character of this is like very, very digital and a little bit funky. And again, like highly inspired in my approach by the Lexicon 224, which we'll compare to in a second. I'm going to take a short break and collect my thoughts a little bit more about reverb. I love these synthetic tom kind of sounds. And so there are presets in here that I designed to work with this sort of sound, and they're very kind of Alesis 1980s MIDI verb, microverb kind of sounds, just like little rooms. And so there's a bank of reverb algorithms in Bank Z called ambience, and so that they appear at the end of the list, and they're all little tiny spaces. And some of them are very metallic, which is usually something that we don't desire. But if you're going for kind of an 80s lo-fi vibe, these algorithms might fit the bill. There's so many features to talk about in this plugin, though. Let's go grab a different preset here. Not now, Korg. Thank you for the update. But what's this sound? Oh, this is like a cool arpeggio, right? And so there is a preset that's called Arpeggiate Me. There it is. Does like really extreme pitch modulation on it, and D-Res doing funky things. Turn the reverb off. So that's what our arpeggio sounds like without the reverb effect. And then this just like, fuck shit up, as I like to say. Move it all the way wet. Sounds very strange with the wet all the way up. It's really designed to be used more like this. And again, just selecting a different algorithm can give a very different sound. You've also got controls here for shift and scale, and this idea is sort of borrowed from Valhalla Supermassive. Since this reverb is really just 25 delays, what we can do is we can actually shift their values like forward and backward in time. Now these won't have a lot of shift range to them, but we can move them all back so that the shortest delay line is only like about 6 samples. We need 6 samples for the interpolation that my version of the plugin does. But we can also shift them forward in time, which will give us a little bit more of an effect like pre-delay. And this value is symmetric, actually around 0. So there's no shift. Shifted, I guess, I don't know what you'd call this, like forward or backward in time, right? Where the delay lines are going a little longer here, and then in this position they're going a little shorter. There's also a scale parameter. So scale will take the original algorithm and either change the delay lines up to 200% of what they are natively or down to 10%. So like in this one, if we shift the scale like way down, it's going to become a very short ambience reverb. And if we scale it up to 200%, it'll have a little more natural sustain. This is a lot more obvious in longer reverb patches, and we'll listen to some of that in a minute. Let's see. Let's grab another sound here. That is fun. I could listen to that for a long time. Is this an arpeggio as well? There, just shut that off. Okay, what's this one? Oh yeah, that's another arpeggio. Let's go back to this more synthy patch. All right, we'll never get through the parameters at this rate. Let's go back to our init patch. And there's a little tiny bug there. I'll get that worked out. So here's our initialization patch. Let's move our filter all the way up. And let's talk about some of the possibilities here that you have with DRes. So if we move DRes down like this, now the reverb is bit crushed. And just as I showed in the very first part of this video with kCosmos, you can modulate DRes with a dedicated LFO. Now we don't have to use one from Bitwig in this case because I've built it in. So we have this WT table, which is a wavetable selector. So of course, if I'm going to do an LFO, because I'm the wavetable guy, I'm going to do wavetable LFOs, right? And so we've got, I don't know, it's about 24, not quite to Z. So there's about 24 different wavetables that are from KRC MathWaves, and a couple that I generated just for use in this plugin, and we will get there. The default is a wavetable that morphs between a sine wave and a triangle wave. And this WT thing, the first thing called LFO, it modulates DRes. So it's a dedicated LFO to modulate DRes. And so let's go with the default table. At position 0, it's a sine wave. At position 100, it's a triangle wave. Let's just use the triangle wave, shall we? And then you've got a rate control that tells you how fast it's going to be in hertz. And then we've got a depth. And so listen to this. Now we're moving the depth up, and that's modulating DRes, and it's going to give us that pitch modulation on the whole reverb tail. And I let you get pretty crazy with it. And what this does is it modulates DRes downward so that you get these kind of weird pitch effects. But one thing that you can't do with kCosmos is, there's DRes on both the right and the left channel. And so there's a phase control here that can actually change the phase of the LFO and how it affects the right versus the left channel. And so if you move this, you can actually get an effect that's just like a stereo spatialization, and you won't hear as much pitch change because the LFOs are out of phase. Like if we move LFO phase up to about 180, like at exactly 180, they'll cancel each other. And let's just type it in here, 180. Pretty weird, right? So we're no longer hearing distinct pitch shifts because our left and right ears are hearing a different thing, and our brains do something very strange with that. If we move this back to 0, now you can hear that really strong pitch bending effect that's being caused by D-res. So it's kind of nice to set it, somewhere in between 0 and 180, or between 180 and 360, so that we just hear this really interesting like stereo effect. And then, with the phase at 0. It's very cool. And because we have different wave shapes, right? So that was a sine wave modulation. Here is that was a sine wave. It was a triangle. We could change it to a sine. And that's very useful, right? So you can hear the difference in that sound versus the triangle wave. But there's a lot of more complicated ones. So there's like a sine to square. There's the binary multi-ring wavetable. And this one I like quite a lot. It has like sort of a chaotic character to it. So some parts of it are faster, some parts of it are slower. And then so, it sounds like bad tape, right? I'm intentionally turning the depth up very high so that you can hear the effect. But we'd really want to use it kind of in this range, anywhere between 0 and 5%. And it just creates this kind of, well, that's a little bit too hot, isn't it? It creates this kind of nostalgic effect. That's why this is called liminal space. And again, if we change the phase of the left and the right channels and that pitch modulation with respect to each other, we just get this really cool effect. Now, since I'm into modulation, there is also a dedicated modulation LFO that can have different targets. And so again, the default here is a sine to a triangle, which is, I have to say, probably the most useful of the wavetables that are in here. You're going to get like pretty strange results if you go with like a PWM wavetable or like a sine to square wavetable. But it lets you do all sorts of different creative effects. Like what we can do with this mod LFO is we can select a frame from it. So if I'm here at like frame 0, that's going to be a sine wave. Or if I'm up here, it's going to be a triangle wave, right? Or I could be kind of in the middle between a sine and a triangle. And then I can select a mod target. And one of the mod targets that's built in is LFO rate. There's also LFO depth. And again, the thing that's just called LFO is the D-res LFO. And so let's modulate the rate of the D-res LFO, which I have at a low frequency here. Let's make it so that it gets more chaotic. And so we'll change our mod LFO rate up here to like 1 hertz and select a little bit of depth. And we'll go back up and change our phase so we can actually hear the pitch effect. And that's like, it's really kind of cassette-like. And so I did do a preset that's called cassette. And this one, so it's derezzed, and then it kind of has this wow and flutter effect, and that's how he built that effect. There's an LFO modulating derez, and there's the mod LFO is modulating its rate. There's another preset that's called VHS that uses the same technique but more complex wavetables. Very complex the way that pitch changes over time. It's chaotic. Um, so that's the LFO control and the mod LFO. The mod LFO can target a bunch of different things. It doesn't just it's not just the derez LFO. So you've got derez LFO rate, you've got the derez LFO depth, and then you've got the actual frame that's being used in the wavetable that's modulating derez. And you've got other targets too. So there's a dedicated LFO for the delay depth. We'll get there. And so you can target its depth. You can target its. I just did depth for DLFO. Surely there's a good DSP reason for that. There's also a pitch shift depth and pitch shift rate that you can target with the mod LFO, and we'll hear some of that. So moving down past the modulation LFO. There is a section that's my attempt to add some diffusion to this reverb. So, like I said, there's no diffuser in this reverb, but my idea was, well, we could take the individual delay lines and we could modulate them with a dedicated LFO. Again, it is a wavetable LFO. So the DLWT here, DLWT table means delay wavetable table. I know that's redundant. And again, it defaults to a sine to a triangle. So it'll be a sine wave right here. And then we've got DLFO rate and DLFO depth. Now with DLFO depth off, there's no there's no diffusion effect. With DLFO up, and you'll hear a little crackling because this parameter is not smoothed because it doesn't really make sense. We get these like micro timing differences between the delays. And so the read head of the delays is being modulated by this wavetable to kind of create a little more richness, and it makes some sort of weird like stereo effects. You're not going to hear it very much. It's very subtle, but it's more noticeable on very, very short reverb algorithms like those ones from the ambience bank. It can, a lot of those, because they're very short, some of them will be very metallic. And if you apply a lot of DLFO modulation to them, it breaks up those standing waves and they become less metallic sounding. It's a very subtle but interesting effect. And then by default, because there's like 20 different taps, right, for the long reverb tail, instead of modulating them all the same, we spread the phases of them by default so that they're all staggered with respect to each other. And so at a phase spread of 100%, like the first and the last one are completely out of phase, and then every other each of the other delay lines is 20% changed from the other ones. Or is it 5%? I guess it'd be 5% because there's 20 of them. And so if we want to stagger them by 100%, there would be they'd be 5% different. If you turn this down, the phase spread, to 0, let's make it real extreme. Oh, now you can hear it. Now all of those wavetable LFOs are synchronized, and we get this kind of weird it's like a vibrato effect, right? And if we spread the LFOs out, it's something like diffusion now. So that's the phase spread parameter. There's also a depth spread parameter. So imagine, if you will, that we modulate each of the delays with a different depth. And so what depth spread does, if depth spread is at 0, all of the delays have the same depth of modulation. But if we move this parameter up all the way, what happens is that the shortest delay line has no depth modulation on it, and the longer ones have 200% of the depth that you set here. And so that just gives us a different diffusion character, right? Where the tiny delay lines are not being modulated very much, but the longest ones are being modulated more. And then we can also change the percentage. Now, this is a very subtle effect, but by default, all of the delays will be modulated. But we can also select just 80% of them, which is just arbitrary. It's like the first 80% of the taps, 60% of the taps, 40% of the taps, just a couple of taps at 20%. Or we can select them by their size. So we've got 80% of the short ones, 60% of the shortest ones, 40% of the shortest ones, 20% of the shortest ones, or 80%, 60, 40, 20 of the longest taps. And this shows up in another place in the reverb where it's a lot more noticeable, back in the pitch shift section. All right. So that's the DLFO modulation, which is, it kind of gives this some diffusion, which you don't find in kCosmos. And you can freely select different wavetables here, like this Bezier curve one, to get more complex kind of diffusion characteristics. It doesn't really matter what you select here. You can't break the reverb by selecting different LFO depths here. But you can also you could grab the mod LFO. There's our mod LFO. We could, instead of targeting pitch shift depth there, we could modulate the DLFO depth. And so this will give you even more different diffusion characteristics. That's pretty cool. All right, moving on. We've got tone controls. So kCosmos has a low-pass filter that filters the signal coming into the reverb, and that's the filter parameter that's up here. So we can go dark, very dark, or brighter. But inspired by the Lexicon 224, I ripped off the idea of the 224's bass, mid, and treble controls, which I have always found quite mysterious, to be honest. But I implemented that same idea here, even though this reverb does not work in the same way as the 224. There are two things in this reverb that control the length of the tail. So one is the algorithm itself, and then two is the regen control, right? With the Lexicon, I'm not really sure how they do the regeneration. I guess it's the depth parameter in that controls, how much the signal feeds back into itself to keep the reverb going. But here it's a combination of the algorithm and the regen control. But there is this tone section. You can turn it on by setting tone down here to on. And let's get out of this Let's get out of this messed up preset. Let's see. Are we here on the defaults? Yeah, we should be now. Okay. Let's go down here to the tone section. We'll turn on tone. And so instead, oops, we got to change our filter back to 100% here. Let's set the incoming filter to 100%. And now we're going to get the full input signal going into the reverb. But if we go down here to tone and turn the tone control on, now we've got a treble control, which is it's essentially a 2-pole low-pass filter. So that's a 12 dB per octave filter, and you can hear it rolling off the highs there. As the reverb regenerates, we're going to cut off those high frequencies. And I've got it set very low here. We could set it to like 640 hertz and get a reverb that turns very dark, but over time, which is a different effect than the filter control. And then there's another one of these spread parameters. So just like we had the DLFO spread, where we take like the shortest delays and we don't modulate them, we take the longer delays and we modulate them to 100%. The HF spread, the high frequency spread, says, well, let's take the shorter of our delay taps and make them brighter. So at 100%, what happens is that the longest delays are targeted with it's so hard to explain. They're targeted with a delay. Sorry, they're targeted with a filter that actually hits this number. So the longest delay is now going to be filtered at 1700 hertz, but the shortest delays have zero modulation on them, or the tone filtering on them. And so this gives us something that's a little brighter in the early reflections, and then it's dark in the long tail. Let's turn the treble way down. And then as we back off the high frequency spread, we're biasing those individual filters less and less. And then it'll be very dark, like here. A lot of subtlety to this, but I think it's really cool. And so then you've got, just like on the Lexicon 224, base T60 and mid T60 controls. Now, these don't really align with times. So what T60 means is the time it takes for the Lexicon 224 for that frequency band to reach 60 decibels less volume than the input signal. But what this allows you to do is gradually taper the bass of the midsection in different ways. So if we like move the mids all the way down like this, you hear that we're just left with like the highs and the very lows, right? And the crossover is at 2000 hertz here, but we could move it way down and you'll just hear this kind of scooped midsection in the reverb. And of course, it's going to sustain less because there's less there's less information being fed back into the reverb. We could instead move the bass way down. Let's move the mids all the way up. And you can do those kind of shimmery things that you sort of get on the 224. We'll move the treble up. And now the highs sustain, but the lows decay much faster. So that's a really interesting effect. And this allows for a lot of subtlety. Now, with that tone section engaged, the reverb will not, well, parts of it will regenerate forever. So if we move regeneration all the way up, we will still have infinite-ish sustain, but you can see that like the lows have all dropped out and now it's just the high frequency part, which can get a little annoying. But this sort of sound is a sound that I associate with like the Blade Runner soundtrack, right? Which used the Lexicon 224. That's why I have a patch here called Like Our Owl. Let's change out mod wave native for multi-poly and get our fractional bell pad back. Multi-poly native. As I like to say, is this a boring video? No, it's an exciting video. It's very interesting. Oh, there's that stupid Tom Sawyer sweep. I really wish that were not the default. Not now. Let's go get one of my demo patches here. KRC Liminal, let's get our bell back. At least I wasn't torturing you with this bell for the entire video, but maybe I will for the rest of it. Like, I love that like high-end shimmery effect that's got some chorusing in it, and you know the bass just like drops out. Just a lot of different effects that you can get with Liminal Space. And there's presets to guide you to the interesting destinations. Okay, we talked about the DRes LFO. We talked about the mod LFO a little bit. We talked about the tone section. And the last section that we're going to look at is the pitch shift section, which gives you these chorusy kinds of effects. You can get extreme with it if you want to, and it'll get kind of dissonant. And really weird. And so I'll talk in detail about some of this in our next segment. But it's time for me to take a break because I'm tired of talking. So catch you in a minute. Okay, let's talk about the pitch shift section of Liminal Space. I'm going to go back to my initialization patch so we can just hear it by itself. So there's the init reverb. Let's put our filter all the way up. So we've got a bunch of highs in there, right? And we'll go down here past the tone section. So right after the tone on-off control, you've got, again, a wavetable selector for the pitch shift LFO table. So pitch shift WT table, that's the wavetable. The default is the signed triangle. I'm going to, it is by default up at 100%. So it's a triangle wave. And so we've got controls for the pitch shift rate, which work best in kind of a low rate, and the pitch shift depth. And as I move this up, here's the unpitch shifted version of the reverb, right? As I move depth up, I had to put my mix in there. So we've got PS mix, we've got a mix control. The mix control for the pitch shift mix should generally be at 100% if you want these pitch shifting effects. We might talk about that more. But as we move the depth up, what you're going to hear is you're going to hear pitch shifting in the reverb tail. We can move it really extreme if we want. I really like that sound. It gets chorusy, but you know, the chorus is coming from pitch shifting the individual delay lines. And so it's different from just like running a reverb through a chorus. It's like the reverb itself does this impossible thing where the lengths of the delay lines are moving with respect to each other. If we go up here, it'll become like cacophonous. Kind of unsettling, yeah? But we can get all sorts of different like chorusy effects by adjusting the rate and the depth of the wavetable modulation. Now, there's a really strange thing that happens with the way that I implemented the pitch shift here. The pitch shift is done, there's basically two versions of the delay line that are crossfading between each other, like one's pitched up, one's pitched down. And then the wavetable is modulating how that happens. If we have a triangle wave, which has a perfectly linear slope, because that's characteristic of the triangle wave, right? It goes up and it goes down, and the slope doesn't change. We get this like stable pitch shifting effect. But if we select a waveform using the PSWT position control, like that's a sine wave. So at the 0 position, this wavetable that goes from sine to triangle is going to be a sine wave. You hear that? The pitch has a bias downward, and it continues downward as the reverb regenerates. And that's because the slope of the sine wave changes. And so I was hoping actually that having a wavetable LFO here would give you a lot of different options, but basically what happens is that if the wave shape that's modulating the pitch depth has closer to a constant slope, you'll have a stable pitch shift effect. I almost said pitch shit, didn't I? And if you've got one that spends more time going slower, like in a sine wave, the pitch will drift down. And so you might be wondering, well, is there a wave shape where the slope spends more time speeding up than it does slowing down? And there is. And we can find that in the poly triangle. So there's a polygonal triangle wavetable. And at the 0 position, it's a true triangle wave. But as we move it up, it gets sharper and sharper. And what you'll hear as we move the position up, hear how the pitch starts to bend up. And depending on what position you pick, you will get different sorts of pitch bend up. And that's influenced by the pitch shift rate as well. Right? And you can mix the pitch shifted signal back into the original signal at lower amounts, but that will become a little bit unpredictable. Like I say, if you're pitch shifting this reverb, you probably want your PS mixed at 100%. The other thing that happens is that because there's these cancellations in the phase, right? There's different pitches for the different delay lines. They're going to both boost and cancel. And so over time, what will happen is the reverb will tend to decay. It will no longer, if our regen is at 100%, it will no longer infinitely sustain. I think we'll hear that. And hopefully this won't blow our ears out. You have to be a little bit careful when you're experimenting with these features. So you see that it sustains, longer than it was before, but it will eventually die out. And that's because of these cancellations. There is a compensation for that we'll talk about. So let's move our pitch shift mix all the way back up. And you can see that there's a couple different failure modes that can happen here. So if you look at the spectrum plot that we've got going, you can see that the low frequencies, which are less sensitive to this phase cancellation effect that's happening, are going to die out a little slower. And so there is a dedicated high pass filter on the pitch shift that's per tap that'll keep those low frequencies from building up so much. And then just like with the other spread controls, there is a phase spread so that the wavetable LFO is at a different point in its phase cycle. For each of the delay taps, we can synchronize them if we want to, at the risk of getting like out of control feedback. That's not happening here, so that's good. And then we've got a depth spread as well. So this is a lot like the DLFO depth spread parameter, but it's for the pitch shift depth. That is really hard to say. It's for the PS depth. And so in this case, the shorter delay lines are being modulated less as we move this up, and the longer delay lines are being pitch shifted more. And that just gives us some kind of cool effects when things are desynchronized. If you're wearing good headphones or listening on good monitors, you'll hear all sorts of subtle things happening there. Cross-panning effects as those delay lines modulate in different ways. And we'll put the phase spread back up. And let's move the depth spread down. So it's a little more synchronized there. And just like with the DLFO, we can choose which taps are being modulated with pitch shift. The default is all of them, but we can select 80% of them, 60% of them, 40% of them. Uh-oh, I hear some runaway feedback maybe happening. So that's kind of interesting, right? So we get less of that phase cancellation, which will make this thing sustain infinitely, but it's going to be like a very strange spectrum. I think that's pretty nifty. And you will actually, if you have the DLFO modulation going, so the delay lines themselves, the read position of the delay lines, that will change the chorusing effect a little bit more itself. There's all sorts of interesting sweet spots to explore. But back to the tap percentage, another thing you can do is you can just, again, like with the DLFO, you can select just the 80% of the shortest taps, 60% of the shortest taps, etc., or just the longest taps. And I kind of think that's an interesting effect. If we go to 80% of the long taps, now the short ones are not being pitch modulated, but the longest ones are. And let's change this out. Let's change this back to like a true triangle wave, eh? Let's do that so that we don't get that rising pitch. Oops. We've still got a little bit of sine wave character in there. We got to change that to 100%. Go, Bitwig. There we go. And let's move, let's see, the amount down, right? Because it's really deep. So let's change the PS rate to be very slow and a much more manageable depth. Beautiful little chorus on the end of that. Okay. I mean, you got to dig that, right? Again, if you start to get like runaway, low frequency stuff, you can move that high pass filter cutoff here. Let's see. Now, if we did want this reverb to go longer, if I remember correctly, we're already at 100% regen, right? Yeah, we're at 100% regen. And, you know, only some of the sound is going to sustain forever. There is a very dangerous parameter in here because this is a programmer's reverb. It's a programmable but haunted digital reverb. There is this control called feedback trim. And so In the original kCosmos design, Chris, I don't know if he worked this out by math or just experimentation, but he found basically the exact amount of regeneration that you need to keep the reverb going when regen is 100% and keep it going infinitely. When we've got this pitch modulation on the delay lines, of course, like I said, there's going to be cancellations. Now, and what will happen is that like, some frequencies are boosted and some will be attenuated. And we can make up for that attenuation using this FB trim parameter. But you have to be very gentle with this because if you move it too high, you're going to get runaway feedback. And I don't want to do that in this video, but you can try it for yourself. Put a limiter on your master bus, okay? But by moving this parameter up, I can move this pitch shifted reverb further toward infinite sustain. And at some point, what will happen is we'll be feeding back too much and we will get runaway feedback. And that is not pleasant to hear. But this is good. I think we've kind of nailed it here. Like this is almost as long as we can make this reverb, and it's a very cool effect. Oh, and you see, there's low frequencies getting out of control. So we're too hot here. So we might want to move that high pass filter up. And we're going to go over here to regen. And we're just going to dump our delay lines. Let's see what happens here. Now, another way that we can get more sustain is by moving the scale parameter. So we can scale our reverb algorithm up so that it's like about 150% here of the original values. And it will ring out longer. The chorus effect is going to get a little more subtle because it takes longer for this to regenerate. Let's de-res this a little bit, shall we? The LFO modulation, by the way, only works if de-res is engaged. So let's go, now that we've de-res this a little bit, let's go and select, let's get some kind of crazy wavetable here, like the Bell series wavetable. And let's put some pitch modulation on this, right? So LFO rate and LFO depth control de-res, which controls a pitch effect. So that's real seasick. Let's make it more subtle. And by the way, you can go up into the audio rate here. The LFO rate on de-res will go up to 50 hertz, which is kind of a distortion effect. It's not really that musically useful. And let's change our LFO phase so that the left and right channels are decorrelated. That's really cool. Let's listen to that tail. That's a funny thing to say. Anyway, so those are the various pitch shift effects that you can get. Don't be surprised when you select different wavetables and different waveforms that the pitch goes up or down in screwy ways. It's just a creative effect that's there for you. Just imagine you're in the back rooms and the walls are moving. There's one other thing I added here. Let's see, I didn't talk about this. There is interpolation on the pitch shifting. So the read positions by default We're just using a linear interpolation, but you can engage a 6-point interpolation by moving this up. Interestingly, the effect of the interpolation can actually make this reverb sound a little more sandy, a little more like the Lexicon 224, which is interesting. The intent was to keep the sand out, but it makes for a very interesting effect. The other thing that happens is if we have the feedback trim turned up, right? Like we had to increase this a little bit to get the length of the reverb that we wanted. There is a risk of the delays saturating. And so there's a couple different saturation modes. So there's a tangent, soft saturation, there's an arctangent, soft saturation, a cubic version, and a hard clip. And these can give us slightly different effects in the tail. And the hard clipping sounds pretty good to me, actually. We're going to be real gentle with this. We're going to move feedback trim up just a tiny amount. And let's see if we can hear any difference with the hard clip. Like, I really like that sound. So that's the pitch shifting part of the reverb. It makes things very chorusy, sort of spooky, unreal. I did also implement another one of Chris's plugins inside this plugin. Ooh, and see, you can hear that. There's going to be runaway feedback there. So I had the trim set too high. Let's dump those delay lines. Okay. All right, so now we've got this nice long reverb. Another one of his plugins that I really love is called Srsly3, and it's an implementation of a strange stereo widening device from Hughes Electronics, and it's the third version of it. So this code is sort of based on that Hughes device, but it's not slavishly a recreation. But you've got these controls after the pitch shift stuff. So S center, that's for seriously center. You've got center, you've got space, like that's the mid-side control, and then you've got an overall level. And then this version of Seriously like emulates analog filters in the way that the oh boy, let's turn trim all the way down. This peak is going to scare us in about a minute. We have to turn our trim down. FB trim, you're going all the way off. Anyway, so it's got Seriously built into it, and if we change the Seriously mix, we can introduce the Seriously stereo widening effect. And so let's take our center down and let's boost our sides. Whoa! Fat fingers. You can get just really weird stereoization effects by playing with the controls in the Seriously section. And you don't have to go to 100%, you can just mix a little bit of it. So here's the original, which is already quite wide, because these delays are wildly decorrelated, but we can introduce a little bit more. And it creates a very 3D effect, and you'll even find some settings where it feels like the reverb is either like kind of above you or like below you. It's a very interesting effect, and I love it. And it works really well with the reverb, so I just built it right into here. Or it can be off. And then, of course, you've got a dry-wet control for the whole thing. That's here. There's no reverb. It's like we turned it off. And up here, it's 100% wet. Now, I kind of like this, but we were really working from the init patch. And so let's see. Let's change our diffusion stuff a little bit. So again, DLFO it's delay LFO, but you can kind of think of it as diffusion. There we go. Let's turn our tone control on, and let's do a little bit of that lexicon style nonsense. Let's make this darker by moving the treble frequency cutoff down. And let's maybe take away some of the bass. Maybe that crossover is a little too high. There we go. This leaves us with that nice, to me, very 224 sounding decay. Maybe we could use a little more chorusing in the tail of the reverb. So we could move like PS spread up a little bit. We could move our pitch shift depth. That might be too high. That's pretty good. Pretty cool, right? And, to compare that, so, I'm not slavishly trying to recreate the Lexicon 224. But if we grab UAD's version of it, you'll hear how some of these ideas are like kind of cribbed from the 224 in the different ways that those reverb tails respond. And are you going to load? Are you going to load for me or not? Do I have to turn it? What's happening? Why is it not loading? Am I going to have to edit this out? You know how I am. I almost never edit this kind of stuff out. Oh, here it comes. The interface on this thing, I think, is what makes it take so long to load. Well, let's turn off Liminal Space, and let's just listen to... Okay, so there's 224. Let's compare. Okay, no. So no reverb. We'll add reverb from the 224 in. Patches like atmosphere are kind of what I was going for with some of my effects. Let's not have it be at 100%, right? It's nice and sustaining. You see that the low end drops off. And it's got that kind of 12-bit character to it, right? And we get something very similar if we engage liminal space again. Now, the way the 224 actually does that, its pitch modulation is different. It's actually like a sample and hold LFO. If we open the secret panel and we turn pitch shift up, I mean, it has its own kind of unique character, right? And the mode enhancement increases the pitch shift. And so this is the sound, like we associate this sound with the Blade Runner soundtrack and stuff like that. The sound of Liminal Space is a little smoother and like it's not as obviously, like you can almost hear in the 224 the individual delay lines being modulated. It's a little different effect in Liminal Space, but this is the vibe I was going for. And I did actually try to kind of come up with my own version of how the 224 does its kind of sample and hold based delay line modulation. I didn't really get it working right. So I was just like, what I've got is beautiful enough. So there you go. That's Liminal Space. Again, it's available now for Windows CLAP format. I will probably have a build of it for VST3 pretty soon because there is a CLAP wrapper project that allows you to easily package a CLAP as a VST. But like I was saying, like I like things like Bitwig. and like Reaper. And I like the CLAP project. So this is just gonna exclusively be a Windows CLAP thing for a hot second. And I hope some of you that watch me and subscribe to my mailing list and use Kerosene math waves or orchestral impressions or have my multi-poly patches will enjoy this. And I'm gonna price it at $5 intro because, you know, it is still headless. Even though this took hours and hours of research to develop, you know, it's not quite a finished plugin. So if you get in now, when it does have a fancy, cutesy interface that'll probably be all retro-y and Blade Runner-y and backroomsy, you'll get that one for free. And there's still some to-dos here. You know, there's features that maybe I need to hide. There's some features I want to add. But it's a really great tool right now. So go get this at wavetables.lol. That's www.wavetables.lol. Don't forget about the summer sale on KRC Mathwaves. It's just $14.50 if you use code SUMMER25. And as always, check out the links in the description. I'll point to some of the things I talked about today, like Chris's videos and maybe some stuff from Valhalla, which is like an insane resource. The fact that Valhalla DSP has made all these like amazing blog posts about how classic reverbs work are just invaluable if you're going to get into this kind of idea. Fun. Anyway, it's your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol signing off. I will talk to you later.